Do you find yourself in a position where you're hosting a Christmas party and you're not quite ready? Well, I have a craft just for you, and the good news is you can find most of the things right at your local Dollar Tree. Hi, my name is Royce Hunt Bell, owner and operator of Roycycled Treasures. Let's get started. I saw this gorgeous holiday place setting online, but at $80+ for place setting, it was a little bit out of my budget. So I decided I would make a trip to the dollar store. I bought a charger, a plate, and a dessert plate. And I figured I could take these items from the dollar store coupled with some Roycycled decoupage paper. The beauty of this huge piece is I can literally do 4 plates out of one piece of paper. And I'll also be using a acrylic paint marker, you guys. This is super fun. So let's get started. I'm beginning my project with a trimmed piece of Roycycled decoupage paper and my glass plate from the Dollar Tree. I want to make sure that this side where the food is going to be food safe. So we're actually going to decoupage the bottom of our plates. And I want to make sure that my check is centered evenly so that it looks the same all the way around. Now to begin this process, we're going to decoupage, and today I'm going to be using Rock Hard Top Coat by Funkature. This is a marine grade sealer, so we're going to both decoupage and seal with this today. I'm actually going to start my decoupage in the middle of my plate, you guys, and then I'll go around and do my edges as I go. I found that I get the best results when I decoupage my plate in this order. So for right now, I'm just focusing on the bottom, if you will, of the plate, the flat portion. I want my product to be even, but I don't want to have pools because I want to make sure that when it dries that it's completely clear. Working in section gives me more control over my final result and ensures that I have enough product so that my paper sticks to my glass really well. And I'm just going to move all the way around, adhering my paper section by section. Now that my plate is completely covered, I'm going to go ahead and dry this before I move on to the next step. Now that this is pretty much dry, you guys, I'm going to go ahead and trim it. And I'll be trimming it using a 220 grit sanding block. I'm going to be really focusing on the edge of my plate and only pulling my sanding block down. And this is going to give me a nice clean trim all the way around. And just like that, we have a perfectly trimmed and decoupaged plate. Now, this plate looks okay. It's not quite dry yet, but I know that if I paint white behind this paper, it's going to make it pop even more. And I have a few areas under the edges where my edges are lifting up a little bit. So I'm just going to take my brush with a little bit of my Rock Hard Top Coat, and I'm going to go under the edges and really make sure that all of my edges are tacked down really well. And then once my edges are tacked down, I can just go over and put a really liberal coat of my marine gray top coat right over the top of my paper. I'm really using my brush to push down any creases that I have in the paper so that they lay flat. Let's let this dry and we'll come back and we'll do a coat of white paint right over the top. Now that this is dry, I want to go over this with a coat of white paint so that my buffalo check really pops off of the top. I want to make sure that my paint is going to be really smooth, and so I'm actually going to use a roller to apply paint to my plate. I'm actually using Wise Owl's Chalk Synthesis paint in Antique Via, and just a simple foam roller to roll this paint onto this surface. This is going to help me achieve a really nice smooth surface. If I were doing a whole set of these, I would decoupage all of them, and then that way I could roll the paint, all of them at the same time. After my paint dries, you guys, we're going to go over this with another coat of our marine grade sealer. And this second coat is just going to really help us ensure that we're able to wash these dishes. Now, we won't be able to put this in the dishwasher, right? It's not dishwasher safe, but you'll be able to clean these well enough to use them again for the next season. And just like that, we have a buffalo check plate. How cool is that? Let's set this aside and let it dry completely, and we'll move on to the next part of our place setting. Now, the next part of our place setting is our super simple white dessert plate. You guys, this is going to be so flippin' easy. I have this acrylic paint marker pen that I bought. When you use these, you want to make sure that you shake them well, really well every time you use them. The cool thing about using acrylic with ceramic, you guys, is once I'm done with my design, I can sit my plate in my oven while it's still cool, turn my oven on to 350, leave it in there for 30 minutes. So the plate's gonna sit in there and warm up with the oven and cook for 30 minutes, including your preheat time. And I'll let my plate cool off, and when I pull it out, the acrylic is actually going to become part of my plate, so that this plate will still be food safe, even though I've been able to put something super special on it. When I'm using my acrylic marker, I'm going to go off to the side and put pressure on my point just to make sure that my paint is running well before I start. Now for this design, I want to do something super simple, but I think it's going to make this place setting really, really cute. And the red is going to pop off of the buffalo check beautifully. Super simple, but special, right? And so I'll take this plate and I'll bake it in the oven, and when it's done, this Mary will basically be a part of this dish. Now that I've finished my other two, it's time to create our charger. So I found this charger at the Dollar Tree for $1, you guys. So begin to prepping this charger for paint. I'm going to use a 330 grit sanding pad, and I'm really going to give this a good sanding. I really want to make sure that I have enough tooth so that my paint sticks. Now that I've given it a good sand, I'm going to wipe away any of this dust that's left on the plate. I'm going to start with a base coat of a light gray. For this project, I'll be using Wise Owl and Smoky Quartz. Now, in order to apply my paint, I actually won't be using a brush today. I'm going to be using a melamine sponge. You guys know these as like magic erasers, but if you look up melamine sponge on Amazon, you'll find that they're a lot less expensive. So I am just going to go in and apply my paint. And there's a couple of things. I'm laying down some really geometric shapes, and I'm also laying down just a little bit of texture to really emulate the look of galvanized metal. And that's it. Now that I have full coverage with my smoky quartz, I'm going to let this dry and then we'll move on to the next step. Now that my smoky quartz is all dry, you guys, I'm ready to move on to the next step in creating this faux galvanized metal finish. The next color that I'm going to be using is a super dark gray. This is Wise Owl's Chalk Synthesis Paint in Carbon. It's almost black. Now for this step, I'm going to be a little bit more deliberate in my pattern. You guys will see I've taken my melamine sponge and I've cut it in half, and I just used some regular wood glue and glued this together. I drew these really geometric shapes on the end of my sponge, and then I went in with my scissors and just cut around those shapes. And I'm going to use this to create the texture of my galvanized metal. I'm also going to be using a paper plate, you guys, and dabbing off a lot of my excess paint to give me more control over my final finish. And so I'm just going to dab this directly into the carbon and dab off a lot of that paint onto my plate. And then I'm going to come back in and I am just going to add that texture to my plate. And you guys will notice that I'm twisting my sponge the entire time in order to prevent any kind of patterning or anything that looks like it may not be random. I think I'm happy with that coverage, you guys, and you can see all those random, like really geometric shapes that were left by our sponge. So we'll let this dry and then we'll come back with our next color. Now that our dark gray has dried, we're actually going to come in with some of Wise Owl's Heavy Metal Metallic Gilding Paint. And for this one, I'll be using Mercury. I love using a metallic for this last coat because it's really going to bring it together and make it look like galvanized metal. And I'm going to just pour a little bit on my plate for this one. And using that same kind of a stencil sponge that I used for the dark gray, I'm going to use for the metallic. And we're going to do the exact same thing, you guys. We're going to tap that on our plate, really moving that sponge around and making random shapes onto the plate. This is my favorite part because I feel like this is when it really starts to come together. Now for your last step here, you guys, you can go in and make any adjustments as you see fit. So if I think there's too much of the metallic, I can go back in with my gray and kind of knock that back a little bit and just go back and forth until I'm satisfied with my final product. And there we go, you guys. Doesn't that look like it's a really nice galvanized metal plate. Let's let this dry, and then we're going to seal this with our marine grade sealer to make sure that this platter lasts through the season. Now that our piece is all finished, you guys, I just love the way that came out. We're going to go ahead and do a coat of our rock hard top coat. And this is just going to protect our finish, and putting this all across all 3 of the layers are really going to help to unify the sheen of the layers so that the final finish looks more consistent, and it actually is going to help it look more like galvanized metal than even before. Remember, you guys can do any of the things that you've seen me do here today. You can do this, you can do it today. Thank you so much for joining. Be sure, if you're looking for Roycycled decoupage paper, to find your nearest retailer at roycycled.com.